The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry when Grant tossed the pen onto the cheap laminate table, looking at his wife of 6 years with nothing but contempt. He told her she was an anchor dragging him down, a woman with no ambition who would never amount to anything more than a waitress at a diner. He thought he was cutting loose dead weight to chase a brighter future with a younger, wealthier woman. He had no idea that the phone ringing in Audrey's pocket, the call she was too heartbroken to answer, was a lawyer from the formidable Kensington Trust. Grant Sterling had just divorced a woman who, unbeknownst to her, had become the sole heiress to a $1.3 billion real estate empire that very morning. The radiator in the cramped third-floor walk-up in Chicago clanked violently, a metallic cough that seemed to mock the silence in the room. Audrey Miller sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm tea. Her fingers were red and chapped, the result of a double shift scrubbing dishes at Sal's diner, because the dishwasher had broken down again. She was exhausted, the kind of tired that settles deep in the marrow. But she was waiting. She was always waiting for Grant. Grant Sterling walked in 10 minutes later, bringing a gust of icy wind and the scent of expensive cologne. Santal, 33, that Audrey knew they couldn't afford. He didn't look at her. He went straight to the mirror in the hallway, adjusting the lapels of a suit Audrey had maxed out her credit card to buy him for his interviews. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way. Dark hair, jawline like a cliff edge, and eyes that used to look at Audrey with adoration, but now only held impatience. "You're still up," Grant said, his tone flat. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Rent is due on Tuesday." "Grant," Audrey said softly, not looking up from her tea. "The landlord called. He said if we're late again, he's starting the eviction process. I need $60 to cover the gap." "Did you get the commission check?" Grant laughed, a harsh barking sound. He turned away from the mirror and finally looked at her. "The commission check. You think that piddling amount matters?" "You're so small-minded, Audrey. Always worrying about $60 here, $100 there. It's suffocating." Audrey flinched. "It's not small-minded to want a roof over our heads. I worked 14 hours today. I just need to know if we're safe." Grant sneered, walking into the kitchen. He loomed over her, his shadow casting a pall over the table. "There is no we anymore, Audrey. That's what I came home to tell you. I'm done." The room seemed to tilt. Audrey set the mug down, her hand trembling. "Done? What do you mean?" "I mean, look at you," Grant said, gesturing vaguely at her stained uniform and her messy bun. "You smell like old grease and desperation. When I married you, I thought you had potential. I thought we'd build something. But 6 years later, you're still a waitress. You're an anchor, Audrey, and I'm a kite trying to fly. You're holding me down." Tears pricked her eyes, hot and stinging. "I'm a waitress, so you could take those real estate courses. I'm a waitress, so you could intern for free at the Blackwell firm. I paid for this apartment, your car, that suit, and that's all you'll ever be good for." Grant cut her off, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper. "Paying the bills while men like me do the real work. But I've found someone who actually understands the world I belong in. Someone who doesn't count pennies." Audrey felt the air leave her lungs. "Who?" "Chloe," Grant said, watching her reaction with a detached curiosity. "Chloe Vance. Her father owns the dealership. She has class, Audrey. She has connections. And unlike you, she doesn't look like this." He threw a brown manila envelope onto the table. It slid across the surface and hit her mug with a dull thunk. Divorce papers, Grant said. I had a friend draft them. I want a clean break. No alimony, no splitting of assets, not that we have any. You keep your debt, I keep my future. Sign them and I'll be out by tonight. Audrey stared at the envelope. The betrayal wasn't a sharp knife. It was a bludgeon, heavy and crushing. She had given him her 20s. She had sacrificed her own college fund to pay off his gambling debts 3 years ago. She had stood by him when his own family disowned him. "You're leaving me," Audrey whispered, "because you think I'm poor." "I'm leaving you because you're a loser, Audrey," Grant said, checking his watch. "And I don't associate with losers. Chloe is waiting in the car. Sign the papers." The silence that followed was deafening. Audrey looked at the man she had vowed to love forever. He wasn't just leaving. He was discarding her like a used wrapper. The cruelty of it, leaving her for a woman with money, specifically because Audrey had spent all of hers supporting him, was a bitter irony that tasted like bile. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the tea in his face, though she wanted to. A strange, cold calm settled over her. It was the numbness of total devastation. "If I sign this," Audrey said, her voice steady, "you leave, right now. You don't take the TV, you don't take the toaster. You take your clothes and you get out. You get out." "Fine," Grant scoffed. "I don't need your junk. Chloe has a 70-inch screen in her penthouse." Audrey pulled a pen from her apron pocket, a cheap plastic promotional pen from Sal's diner. She opened the envelope. The terms were draconian. Waiver of spousal support. Waiver of claim to future earnings. Total separation of liabilities. He was dumping the credit card debt, most of which was his onto her. She should have fought it. Any lawyer would have told her to tear it up. But she was too tired. She just wanted the cancer cut out of her life. She wanted him gone before she broke down. She signed, Audrey Miller. She pushed the papers back to him. Grant snatched them up, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. "You made the right choice, Aud. Don't worry, I'll send you an invite to the housewarming party when I make my first $1 million. You can cater it." He turned on his heel and walked out. The door slammed, rattling the thin walls. Audrey sat alone in the dim kitchen. The silence rushed back in heavier than before. She put her head in her hands and finally let the sob escape. It was a guttural, ugly sound. She was 32, broke, divorced, and alone in a freezing apartment she couldn't afford. 10 minutes passed. Then there was a knock at the door. Audrey wiped her face with her sleeve. If Grant had forgotten his keys, she swore she would scream. She stomped to the door and threw it open. "I told you to." She started, then froze. It wasn't Grant. Standing in the hallway was a man who looked like he had stepped out of a black-and-white movie. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than Audrey made in a year. He held a leather briefcase and wore wire-rimmed glasses. Behind him, 2 large men in dark suits stood silently by the stairwell. "Mrs. Audrey Miller?" the man asked. His voice was like gravel wrapped in velvet. "Yes," Audrey said, stepping back instinctively. "Who are you? I don't have any money for collectors." The man offered a small, polite smile. "I am not a debt collector, Mrs. Miller. My name is Arthur Penhaligon. I am the senior executor for the Kensington Trust, based in London and New York." "Kensington," Audrey frowned. "I don't know anyone in London." "You did," Arthur said. "May I come in? It pertains to your great-uncle, Silas Thorne." Audrey blinked. "Uncle Silas, I haven't seen him since I was 5. My mom said he was a hermit who lived in a cabin in Montana. He was a very private man, yes, Arthur said, stepping into the apartment as Audrey stepped aside, too confused to stop him. He looked around the shabby room but showed no judgment, only a flicker of sympathy. He placed his briefcase on the table right where Grant's divorce papers had been moments ago. Silas Thorne passed away 3 days ago, Arthur said gently. I'm sorry to hear that, Audrey said, feeling a pang of guilt for a relative she barely knew. But why are you here? Did he leave me a box of old books? Mum said he was a hoarder. Arthur clicked the latches of the briefcase. The sound was sharp and precise. He opened the lid and pulled out a thick document bound in blue velvet. Silas Thorne was not a hoarder, Mrs. Miller. He was eccentric. In the 1970s, he began purchasing swampland in Florida and dilapidated warehouses in Brooklyn under various shell companies to maintain his privacy. He had a gift for seeing value where others saw ruin. Arthur pushed a summary sheet toward her. He never married. He had no children. He fell out with your mother years ago, but he kept track of you. He knew you were working hard. He knew you were kind. In his will, he bypassed all other living relatives. Audrey looked at the paper. Her eyes couldn't focus on the words, only the numbers at the bottom. There were too many commas. I don't understand, Audrey whispered. Arthur leaned forward. Mrs. Miller Silas Thorne has left you his entire estate. This includes the Blackwood Commercial Center in Manhattan, the Harborside Complex in Miami, and a liquid assets portfolio. He paused, letting the weight of the room settle. The total valuation of the inheritance after taxes is approximately $1.3 billion. Audrey stared at him. The radiator clanked again. Billion with a B. With a B. Arthur confirmed. And legally, as of the time stamp on the death certificate, it is yours. However, Arthur hesitated, glancing at her left hand, where the pale band of skin showed where her wedding ring used to be. I see you are not wearing a ring. Are you currently married? Audrey's heart stopped. She looked at the empty space on the table where the divorce papers had been. She swallowed hard. I signed the divorce papers 20 minutes ago. My husband took them and left. Arthur's eyebrows shot up. A slow, shark-like smile spread across the lawyer's face, not directed at her, but at the situation. 20 minutes ago? Arthur asked, pulling a gold fountain pen from his pocket. Has he filed them with the court yet? No, Audrey said, her mind racing. He just left. The courthouse is closed until tomorrow morning. Excellent, Arthur said. He pulled a phone from his pocket. Technically, you are still married until a judge stamps those papers. However, did your husband sign a separation of assets agreement? Yes, Audrey breathed. He made me sign a waiver. He wanted a clean break. He didn't want me to touch his future earnings. Arthur chuckled darkly. Then he inadvertently waived his claim to yours as well. Mrs. Miller, if he files those papers tomorrow, he cements the fact that he has no right to a single penny of this fortune. But if he finds out before he files, he'll tear them up. Audrey realized, her hands clenching into fists. He'll stay married to me. He'll drain me dry. Precisely, Arthur said. Which is why, Mrs. Miller, we must ensure he files those papers immediately. We need to play a game. And for tonight, you are not a billionaire heiress. You are still the heartbroken waitress. Audrey looked at the door Grant had walked out of. The man who called her a loser. The man who left her for a woman with a 70-inch TV. She looked back at Arthur, her eyes hardening. The tears were gone. What do we need to do? Audrey asked. Arthur Penhaligon worked with the precision of a surgeon. By 2:00 a.m., the lights in Audrey's cramped apartment were still blazing. The lawyer had summoned a cleanup crew, not for a crime scene, but for a life. A forensic accountant and a private investigator sat on Audrey's second-hand sofa laptops, open, digging into Grant's finances. "He's leveraged the investigator," a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah murmured. "He's maxed out 3 credit cards in your name, Audrey. And he's taken a loan from a shark to pay for that engagement ring for Chloe. He's desperate for cash, but he's projecting wealth. That's his weakness." Arthur nodded, sipping the fresh tea Audrey had brewed. "He thinks you are a liability. We need to confirm that bias. We need him to believe that staying married to you for even 1 more hour will cost him everything." The plan was simple but humiliating. Audrey had to beg. At 8:00 a.m., the sun broke over Chicago, gray and dismal. Grant was at Le Monde, a high-end bistro sitting across from Chloe Vance. Chloe was scrolling through her phone, her manicured nails tapping against the glass screen. She was beautiful blonde and radiated the easy confidence of someone who had never worried about a utility bill. "Are you sure she signed?" Chloe asked, not looking up. "I don't want some desperate waitress dragging out the proceedings, Grant. Daddy is looking at that estate in Lake Forest next week. We need to be clear." "She signed," Grant said, cutting into his Eggs Benedict. "She barely put up a fight. Audrey doesn't have the spine for a legal battle. I'm heading to the courthouse as soon as we finish eating to file the emergency motion. Since there are no assets and no kids, the judge can grant a summary dissolution. I'll be a free man by lunch." Grant's phone buzzed. It was Audrey. He smirked, showing the screen to Chloe. "Right on cue. Probably begging for grocery money." "Put it on speaker," Chloe giggled. "I want to hear this." Grant swiped the screen. "What do you want, Audrey? I told you I'm done." Audrey's voice crackled through the phone, thick with tears. She was standing in her kitchen with Arthur coaching her via hand signals. "Grant, please," Audrey sobbed. "The landlord is here. He says he's going to sue." And the credit card company called. "They said they're garnishing wages. They're coming after spouses too. I can't pay this, Grant. You have to help me. We're still legally married. You have to help." Grant's face went pale. The word garnish terrified him. If Chloe's father found out Grant was drowning in debt, the dealership job and the golden ticket into the Vance family would vanish. "I don't have to do anything," Grant snapped, glancing nervously at Chloe, who looked disgusted by the drama. "You racked up those bills, you pay them." "But the law says," Audrey wailed, "if you don't file the papers today, the debt collectors said they're freezing joint assets tomorrow. They might come after your car." Arthur gave Audrey a thumbs up. "You stay away from my car," Grant hissed. "And you tell those collectors we are finished. I'm filing the papers right now. Don't you dare call me again." He hung up, his heart pounding. "God, she's pathetic," Chloe sneered, sipping her mimosa. "Is she really going to drag you down?" "No." Grant stood up, throwing a napkin on the table. "I'm not waiting for lunch. I'm going to the courthouse now. I need that judge to stamp the decree today so her debt doesn't touch me. I need to make sure she gets absolutely nothing." Grant didn't see the trap. He thought he was running away from a burning building. He didn't realize he was locking the door from the outside, trapping himself in the cold, while Audrey sat by the fire. The Cook County Courthouse was a hive of misery. People sat on benches, clutching paperwork, looking exhausted and angry. Grant Sterling, however, walked through the metal detectors with the swagger of a man on a mission. He had paid an extra fee for an expedited hearing, claiming undue financial hardship caused by his spouse a lie. But Grant was good at those. Audrey was waiting outside courtroom 304. She wore her old grey cardigan and jeans. She looked tall and defeated. Arthur Penhaligon stood a few feet away, blending into the crowd, looking like just another lawyer waiting for a case. Grant marched up to her, not even slowing down. "Do you have the copies?" Audrey handed them over silently. "Good. Now keep your mouth shut. If the judge asks, you agree to everything? You waive alimony. You waive the pension. You waive it all. If you try to ask for a dime, I'll tell the judge about your instability." "I just want it over, Grant," Audrey said, looking at the floor. "Smart girl." They were called in. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Halloway, with glasses perched on the end of her nose, skimmed the paperwork. It was a standard summary dissolution. No children, no property, and a mutual agreement to separate debts. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Halloway said, looking over her spectacles, "you are requesting a complete waiver of spousal support, citing that both parties are self-sufficient." "Yes, Your Honor," Grant said, using his best, trustworthy businessman voice. "My wife, ex-wife, has a steady job. We believe a clean break is best for both of us to move forward." "And Mrs. Sterling," the judge looked at Audrey, "you understand that by signing this, you are permanently waiving your right to any future claim on Mr. Sterling's assets, income, or estate, even if his financial situation changes drastically tomorrow." Grant held his breath. He glared at Audrey from the corner of his eye. Audrey looked up. Her eyes were clear. "I understand, Your Honor. I want nothing from him. Absolutely nothing." "Very well." Judge Halloway stamped the document with a heavy final thud. "Divorce granted. You are no longer legally married. The separation of assets is binding, effective immediately." Grant let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He felt lighter. He was free. The debt was Audrey's problem now. The anchor was cut. "Thank you, Your Honor," Grant said, beaming. He turned to Audrey. "Well, have a nice life, Audrey. Try not to drown." He turned to leave, already pulling his phone out to text Chloe the good news. "One moment, Your Honor." The voice boomed from the back of the courtroom. Grant froze. He turned to Saul to see the distinguished older man in the expensive suit walking down the center aisle. Arthur Penhaligon didn't look like a background extra anymore. He looked like a shark entering a feeding frenzy. "Who are you?" Judge Halloway asked, frowning. "This session is closed. My name is Arthur Penhaligon, representing the Kensington Trust," Arthur said, placing his briefcase on the defense table next to a stunned Grant. "I am here to represent my client, Miss Audrey Miller." "Client?" Grant scoffed. "She can't afford a lawyer like you." Arthur ignored him. He turned to Audrey and bowed slightly. "Ms. Miller, now that the divorce decree is finalized and stamped, I am pleased to inform you that the conflict of interest regarding the Thorne estate has been resolved." "Thorne estate?" Grant asked, a confused frown marring his face. "What is he talking about, Audrey?" Arthur opened his briefcase and pulled out the blue velvet binder. He handed a document to the judge, who took it with a raised eyebrow. "Ms. Miller," Arthur announced, his voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "As the sole beneficiary of your great-uncle Silas Thorne, and now that you are legally a single woman with no financial attachments to this gentleman, the freezing order on your inheritance is lifted." "Inheritance?" Grant laughed nervously. "What did she get the old man's pickup truck?" Arthur turned to Grant, his eyes cold and hard. "No, Mr. Sterling. She has inherited the Blackwood commercial portfolio, 3 residential towers in Miami, and liquid assets totaling $1.3 billion. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the stenographer stopped typing. Grant blinked. "Billion with a B with a B," Arthur repeated, savoring the moment. Grant looked at the judge, then at Arthur, and finally at Audrey. Audrey stood up. She wasn't the small, defeated woman anymore. She stood straight, her shoulders back. "Is this a joke?" Grant stammered, his face flushing red. "Audrey, tell him to stop joking." "It's not a joke, Grant," Audrey said calmly. "Arthur came to me last night, just after you left." Grant's brain short-circuited. "Last night. But that means..." Ideally, he calculated the timeline. "Wait, if you knew last night, and we were still married this morning..." He spun toward the judge. "Your Honor, I object. This is fraud." "She withheld information. I withheld nothing," Audrey said, stepping closer to him. "You drafted the agreement, Grant. You insisted on the waiver. You said, and I quote, 'You keep your debt, I keep my future.' You wanted a clean break. You got it." "But I didn't know," Grant screamed, his voice cracking. He looked at the judge, desperate. "Your Honor, set aside the ruling. We need to renegotiate. I'm her husband. I'm entitled to half." "That's marital property." Judge Holloway looked at the papers in front of her. The papers Grant had practically begged her to stamp 5 minutes ago. She looked at Grant with undisguised distaste. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said icily, "you petitioned for an expedited summary dissolution. You insisted on a total separation of assets. You stated under oath that you wanted no claim on her finances. The decree is signed. It is legal. You are divorced." "No." Grant grabbed the table. "Audrey, baby, listen to me. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. We can work this out. Chloe means nothing to me. We're a team. Remember the anchor and the kite." Audrey looked at him with a mixture of pity and revulsion. "You were right, Grant," she said softly. "I was an anchor. I was holding myself down by staying with you. But now," she looked at Arthur, then back at her ex-husband, "now I'm the kite. And you're just a man who sold a diamond for $60. Audrey turned to Arthur. "Mr. Penhaligon, I'm ready to go. I believe I have some property to inspect." "Certainly, Ms. Miller," Arthur said. They walked out of the courtroom, leaving Grant Sterling screaming at a closed door, while the judge banged her gavel, threatening him with contempt of court. Grant Sterling sat in his leased BMW, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He was hyperventilating. The reality of what had just happened in courtroom 304 was a physical weight in his stomach, heavy and nauseating. $1.3 billion. He slammed his fist against the dashboard, screaming a curse that echoed inside the small cabin. He had to think. He had to fix this. He was a salesman, the best closer at Vance Realty. He could spin anything. His phone buzzed. It was Chloe. "Did you do it?" her text read. "Are we free?" Grant stared at the screen. If he told her the truth, that he had just voluntarily divorced a billionaire to be with her, she would leave him. Chloe Vance loved power, and she loved money. She liked Grant because he projected both. Without them, he was just another suit with debt. "Done," he typed back, his fingers trembling. "Totally free." celebrating tonight. Pick you up at 7, Le Monde. He needed time. If he could just get Audrey alone, away from that shark lawyer, he could manipulate her. She had always been soft, always eager to please him. He just needed to remind her how good they used to be. Meanwhile, across the city, Audrey Miller was stepping into a world she didn't know existed. Arthur's town car, a silent black phantom, glided to a halt in front of the Blackwood Tower, a 70-story needle of glass and steel that pierced the Chicago skyline. Audrey looked up, her neck craning. "I own this," she whispered. "You own the building, the land under it, and the air rights above it," Arthur said, opening the door for her. The moment Audrey stepped onto the pavement, the atmosphere shifted. A team of 4 security guards in dark suits moved to flank her. The revolving doors were held open. A concierge bowed low. "Welcome home, Ms. Miller," the concierge said. They took a private elevator to the penthouse suite, which doubled as the executive office for the Thorne estate. The doors opened to a panoramic view of Lake Michigan that took Audrey's breath away. The carpet was plush, the furniture mahogany. But it was the mirror in the hallway that caught her attention. She saw herself frizzy hair, worn cardigan eyes red from crying. She looked like an intruder in her own castle. Arthur seemed to read her mind. He clapped his hands and 3 women stepped out from a side room. One held a garment bag, another a makeup kit. "We have a board meeting at 5:00 p.m. to formalize the transfer," Arthur said, checking his pocket watch. "And tonight the estate is a primary sponsor for the City Arts Gala. It would be advantageous for you to make an appearance, to show the vultures that the Thorne Empire is in steady hands." "I can't go to a gala, Arthur," Audrey stammered. "I'm a waitress." Arthur placed a hand on her shoulder. "No, Audrey. You were a waitress because you were supporting a man who wanted to keep you small. You are now the matriarch of a dynasty. Let's dress the part." At 8:00 p.m., the City Arts Gala was in full swing at the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel. It was the event of the season, a sea of tuxedos, diamonds, and champagne. Grant walked in with Chloe on his arm. He had maxed out his last emergency credit card to buy a table desperate to keep the illusion of wealth alive for just one more night. Chloe looked stunning in a red silk dress, scanning the room for photographers. "Daddy is here somewhere," Chloe said, sipping champagne. "He wants to talk to you about the promotion to VP. He says if you're finally single, you can focus on the business." Grant swallowed hard. "Great, can't wait." He was scanning the room, terrified. He knew the Thorne estate was a sponsor. He prayed Audrey was back in her hole of an apartment, crying over a tub of ice cream. Suddenly the music quieted. The murmuring of the crowd died down. A spotlight swept to the top of the grand staircase. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, "please welcome the new chairwoman of the Thorne estate and our platinum benefactor, Ms. Audrey Miller." Grant froze. His glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. At the top of the stairs stood Audrey. But it wasn't the Audrey he knew. Her hair was sleek and cascading in soft waves. She wore a midnight blue gown that shimmered like the night sky tailored to perfection. Diamonds real heavy. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears. She looked regal. She looked powerful. She looked expensive. Beside her, Arthur Penhaligon offered his arm. Audrey descended the stairs. The room erupted in applause. Photographers flashed their cameras, a blinding storm of light. "Who is that?" Chloe whispered, squinting. "She looks familiar." "We have to go," Grant said, grabbing Chloe's arm. Now. What? No, that's the woman everyone is talking about, Chloe said, pulling away. The mystery heiress. Daddy wants to meet her. He wants to pitch the dealership land to her. Audrey reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. She moved with a newfound grace, Arthur guiding her straight toward the center of the room, directly where Grant and Chloe were standing. Audrey stopped. The crowd hushed, sensing the tension. She looked at Grant. Her eyes were cool, devoid of the love that used to be there. She looked at the shattered glass at his feet. "Hello, Grant," she said. Her voice was calm, amplified by the acoustics of the room. Chloe dropped her champagne flute. It didn't break, but it spilled onto her shoes. She looked from Audrey to Grant, her eyes widening in horror. "Audrey," Chloe gasped. The waitress, not anymore," Audrey said, a small, polite smile playing on her lips. She turned her gaze to Chloe. "And you must be Chloe, the woman with the 70-inch TV. It's a pleasure to meet you. I want to thank you." "Thank me," Chloe stammered. "Yes," Audrey said, her voice ringing out clearly. "If you hadn't convinced him to divorce me this morning, if he hadn't been so desperate to leave me for you, I would have had to share half of my inheritance with him. You saved me $650 million today." The gasp from the crowd was audible. A few people laughed. Grant looked like he was going to vomit. "Audrey, please, don't do this here." "Do what?" Audrey asked innocently. "I'm just making conversation. Enjoy your evening, Grant. I believe the bar is open. I know how much you hate paying for things yourself." She walked past them, the crowd swallowing her up, leaving Grant and Chloe standing in a puddle of champagne and humiliation. The drive back to Chloe's penthouse was silent, deadly silent. Grant stared at the road, his mind racing. He tried to construct a lie, but the truth had been broadcast to 300 of Chicago's elite. When they pulled up to the curb of the luxury building, Chloe didn't get out. She turned to him, her face a mask of cold fury. "You knew," she said. "I didn't," Grant pleaded, reaching for her hand. She recoiled as if he were a snake. "I swear, Chloe, I found out in court. It was a setup. That lawyer tricked me." "You divorced a billionaire," Chloe said, her voice rising to a shriek. "You had a winning lottery ticket in your pocket, and you threw it away for me. Do you know how humiliating that is? You made me the cheap consolidation prize." "Baby, don't say that. It's about us. We love each other." Chloe laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "Love Grant, look at you. You're a junior broker with a leased car and a mountain of debt. I looked past that, because you had potential. But a man who walks away from $1 billion, that's not potential. That's stupidity. And stupidity is contagious." "Chloe, please. Get out," she said. "This is your car. I can't." "I said, get out," she screamed. She signaled the doorman, who was already walking over. "Get your stuff out of my apartment by tomorrow morning, or I'm burning it." She got out of the car, slammed the door, and marched into the lobby without looking back. Grant was left standing on the curb. It started to rain. The next morning, Grant arrived at Vance Realty at 8:00 a.m., looking haggard. He hadn't slept. He had spent the night in his car. He needed to talk to Mr. Vance. He needed to salvage his job. If he could just explain that he could use his connection to Audrey to get the firm a deal, maybe he could survive. He walked into the office. The receptionist, usually flirty with him, didn't look up. She was typing furiously. "Mr. Vance wants to see you," she said icily. Grant straightened his tie and walked into the corner office. Richard Vance, a bulldog of a man, was standing by the window looking out at the city. "Richard." Grant started putting on his best smile. About last night. Sit down, Vance barked. Grant sat. Vance turned around. He threw a tablet onto the desk. It was playing a video from the gala. Someone had recorded Audrey's confrontation. It already had 1 million views. The title was Waitress Heiress Roasts Cheating Husband. Do you know who the biggest client of Vance Realty is? Richard asked quietly. The Peterson Group, Grant guessed. No, it was the Blackwood Commercial Center. We handled their leasing. $3 million a year in commissions. Grant felt the blood drain from his face. I received a call from Arthur Penhaligon at 7:30 this morning. Richard said, his face turning red. He informed me that the Thorne estate is terminating all contracts with Vance Realty, effective immediately. He cited unprofessional conduct by senior staff and a conflict of interest due to personal animosity against the chairwoman. Richard, I can fix this. I know her. You divorced her. Richard roared, slamming his hand on the desk. You insulted her publicly. You cost me my biggest client because you couldn't keep your zippers up and your ego in check. You're fired, Grant. Get your things and get out. You can't fire me. I'm the top seller. You're poison, Richard yelled, and stay away from my daughter. If you come near Chloe again, I'll have you arrested for harassment. Security escorted Grant out of the building 10 minutes later. He held a small cardboard box containing a stapler and a framed photo of himself. He stood on the sidewalk, the rain soaking through his suit. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from his bank. Alert, insufficient funds. Payment for BMW lease declined. Alert, credit card, ending in 42490 over limit. He had nowhere to go. His apartment key wouldn't work. He had surrendered the lease yesterday, thinking he was moving in with Chloe. He had no job. He had no wife. He had no money. Desperation clawed at his throat. He had one card left to play. He knew Audrey. Despite the cold front she put up last night, she had spent 6 years taking care of him. She was weak. If he could just get her alone, cry a little, apologize, she might at least give him a settlement. $1 million just to make him go away. He hailed a cab using his last $20 cash. Blackwood Tower, he croaked. He arrived at the tower and rushed to the front desk. I need to see Audrey Miller. I'm her husband. Ex-husband. It's an emergency. The concierge looked up. It was the same man from yesterday. He didn't smile. Miss Miller is in a meeting. I'll wait, Grant said, moving toward the elevators. 2 large security guards stepped in his path. They were like walls of granite. Mr. Sterling, the head of security said, we have been instructed to inform you that you are not welcome on any Thorne estate property. She won't turn me away, Grant shouted, causing heads to turn in the lobby. Tell her it's Grant. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I love her. The elevator doors at the far end of the lobby opened. Audrey walked out, flanked by Arthur and a group of investors. She looked powerful, busy, and radiant. Audrey! Grant screamed, trying to push past the guards. Audrey, help me. They fired me. I have nowhere to go. Audrey stopped. She looked across the lobby. She saw Grant, disheveled, wet, and pathetic, being held back by security. For a moment, a flicker of the old Audrey appeared, the one who would have starved so he could eat. But then she remembered the look on his face when he threw the divorce papers on the table. She remembered the loser comment. She turned to Arthur. Who is that man? Arthur smiled. I believe it's a trespasser, Miss Miller. I see, Audrey said. She turned back to the investors. Shall we go to lunch? I'm starving. She walked out the revolving doors without looking back. Audrey, Grant screamed as the guards grabbed him by the arms. Audrey, You owe me, I made you." They dragged him out the side exit and threw him onto the wet pavement of the alleyway. His box of belongings landed in a puddle, the photo of himself cracking down the middle. Grant Sterling lay in the rain, looking up at the golden tower that reached into the clouds. He realized with a crushing finality that the kite had indeed flown away, and the anchor had sunk to the bottom of the ocean. 18 months had passed since the gavel fell in courtroom 304. The Chicago skyline remained unchanged, a jagged jaw of steel against the gray sky, but the lives of the people beneath it had shifted tectonically. Audrey Miller, now Audrey Thorne Miller, sat at the head of the mahogany conference table in the Blackwood Tower. She didn't look like the woman who had once scrubbed grease off diner plates until her hands bled. She wore a tailored cream suit that accentuated her confidence, her hair pulled back in a sleek professional chignon. "The proposal from the Vance Group is rejected," Audrey said, sliding a folder across the table. Her voice was soft, but possessed a steel core that made the room of older men lean in and listen. "But Ms. Miller," one of the junior executives stammered, "they are offering 5% above market value for the warehouse district. They want to tear down the community housing to build luxury condos," Audrey replied, not breaking eye contact. "My great-uncle built this empire on seeing value where others saw ruin. We are not evicting 300 families for a quick profit. We are renovating. We are building a community center, and we are doing it ourselves." Next item. Arthur Penhaligon sat at her right hand, a look of unmasked pride on his face. He had taught her the ropes, but Audrey had possessed the instincts all along. She led with empathy, something the cutthroat world of real estate wasn't used to, and it was working. Profits were up 20%. Later that afternoon, Audrey asked her driver to take a detour. The Blacktown car rolled away from the gleaming glass of the financial district and into the potholed streets of her old neighborhood. They stopped in front of Sal's diner. The sign was new neon pink and buzzing happily. The windows were clean. Audrey had bought the building 6 months ago not to tear it down, but to give Sal the retirement he deserved and to keep the prices low for the locals. She walked in. The bell chimed. The smell of coffee and bacon hit her a nostalgic wave that no longer carried the scent of desperation. "Ms. Audrey." The new manager, a young woman named Sarah, whom Audrey had hired from the dishwashing station, waved from the counter. "The radiator is fixed." "No more clanking," Audrey smiled. "Good to hear, Sarah. Keep the change in the tip jar." She wasn't there to eat. She was there to remember. She touched the counter where she used to stand for 12 hours a day, waiting for Grant to come pick her up, waiting for a life that never came. She had been an anchor, he had said, but anchors kept ships from drifting into the rocks during a storm. Grant had cut his anchor, and he had drifted out to sea. Grant Sterling was tired. It was a bone-deep exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. He adjusted his bow tie in the cracked mirror of the staff locker room. He was working the dinner shift at the Gilded Lily, a banquet hall on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't a prestigious job. He was a server bringing trays of rubbery chicken and lukewarm fish to wedding guests who didn't look him in the eye. His fall had been absolute. After Vance Realty fired him and blacklisted him, no reputable firm would touch him. The viral video of Audrey roasting him at the gala had followed him like a bad smell. He had tried to move to New York, but the Thorne estate's influence was vast. He had tried to date, but a quick Google search of his name brought up articles titled "The Billion-Dollar Mistake" and "Chicago's Most Regretful Ex." He was living in a basement apartment that smelled of mold, driving a 10-year-old sedan. that rattled when it went over 40. Every day was a struggle to pay rent. Every day was a reminder of what he had thrown away. "Sterling, move it," the floor manager barked. "Table 4 needs champagne. VIP guests." "I'm going," Grant muttered, grabbing a tray. He walked into the banquet hall. It was a charity fundraiser for the Thorne Miller Foundation, the very organization his ex-wife had founded. He hadn't realized it when he signed up for the shift with the temp agency. He had just seen the hourly rate and taken it. He kept his head down, praying she wasn't there. He moved through the crowd, offering glasses, trying to be invisible. "Oh, excuse me," a voice said as he bumped into someone. Grant froze. He knew that voice. He looked up. Audrey stood there. She was talking to the mayor of Chicago. She looked radiant, happy, and impossibly out of reach. She held a crystal flute of sparkling water. Grant turned to run to hide, but he bumped into a guest behind him. The tray in his hand tipped. 3 glasses of champagne slid off and crashed onto the floor, shattering instantly. Liquid splashed onto Audrey's cream suit. The room went silent. "You idiot!" the floor manager hissed, rushing over. "I'm so sorry, Miss Miller. This man is incompetent. He's fired immediately. Get out, Sterling." Grant stood amidst the broken glass, his face burning with a humiliation so intense he wished the floor would swallow him. He looked at Audrey, his eyes pleading. He looked old, his face lined with stress, his hair thinning. "Audrey," he whispered. The mayor looked at Grant with disdain. "Do you know this man, Ms. Miller?" Audrey looked at Grant. She looked at the stain on her suit. She looked at the man who had told her she would never be anything more than a waitress. She didn't get angry. She didn't scream. She didn't lecture him. She simply smiled a polite, distant smile one gives to a stranger. "No," Audrey said calmly. "I don't know him. It was just an accident." She turned to the floor manager. "Please don't fire him on my account. Everyone has bills to pay. Just perhaps find him a towel." She turned back to the mayor and continued her conversation, stepping over the broken glass as if it and Grant were nothing more than minor inconveniences. Grant stood there frozen. She hadn't even recognized his existence enough to hate him. To her, he was no longer a husband or an enemy or a kite. He was just a clumsy waiter. He dropped to his knees and began picking up the shards of glass, cutting his fingers on the sharp edges. He watched her walk away, laughing at something the mayor said, surrounded by light and warmth. Audrey walked out onto the balcony of the banquet hall later that night. The air was crisp. Arthur joined her, handing her a fresh glass of water. "I saw what happened inside," Arthur said quietly. "You were very kind." "I wasn't kind, Arthur," Audrey said, looking out at the city lights. "I was indifferent. Hate takes energy. Anger takes energy. I don't have any left for him. I used it all to build this." She gestured to the city, to the skyline, where her building stood, to the lights of the homes she had saved. "You have done well, Audrey," Arthur said. "Silas would have been proud. You inherited a fortune, but you earned your empire." Audrey took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. "I think I'm finally flying, Arthur," she said. "Yes, my dear." Arthur smiled. "And no strings attached." Audrey Miller turned back to the party, leaving the cold night behind, stepping into the warmth of a future that belonged entirely to her. Audrey's journey from a heartbroken waitress to a real estate mogul proves that the best revenge isn't anger, it's massive, undeniable success. Grant Sterling spent his life chasing status and money, only to realize too late that he had abandoned the only thing of real value, a loyal partner. He ended up exactly where he thought Audrey belonged, serving others, while she built an empire. It's a powerful reminder that we should never let others define our worth. The person you overlook today could be the one signing your paycheck tomorrow. Grant wanted a kite to fly, but he forgot that without a strong hand to hold the string, a kite is just a piece of plastic lost in the wind. If you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who needs a reminder of their own worth, and subscribe for more real-life dramas and twisted tales. See you in the next video.